All right. Welcome, everybody, to the NFL show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. I'm your host for the NFL show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, NFL beat writer, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
All right. And we had a very interesting Sunday in the NFL, a lot of injuries. And I think maybe we're seeing now that effect of no training camp, Sam.
Yeah, when we talked about week one, we thought it wasn't such a big deal because most teams came out and played well. But now looking at it, I mean, certainly it seems like it's got to play a hand in this somehow. Saquon Barkley's torn ACL. He's done for the year. Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas are both feared to have torn their ACLs. Cortland Sutton tore his ACL. Devante Adams is a hamstring. Jimmy G's going to miss some time. Drew Lock's missing time. Malik Hooker tore his Achilles. There's so many guys who are going to miss a significant amount of time this year or the entire season because of injuries.
Yeah, so this year may be won by the team with the least amount of injuries. It may be more of an attrition thing than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it really could be. I mean, just look at the 49ers. Look what's happened to them. Yeah, George Kittle didn't even play the other day, neither did Richard Sherman. You lose Bosa and Thomas. Jimmy G's missing time. And Raheem Mostert went down as well. So if a team like that is missing that many players, you could definitely see a situation where health just comes in and becomes a big factor.
Yeah, their other issue is I think the Rams look a lot better than what people expected.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, Philadelphia, it's hard to judge because Philadelphia's been such a bad team. These these first 2 weeks, so it's hard to tell how much.
You had to win against Dallas last week, too. And still, the win in Philadelphia, even though there's no crowd, I mean, it's still a West Coast team coming all the way East Coast to win, and they dominated the game.
Yeah, and it felt like they were in charge of it the entire time. So I think the big thing for me is the Rams' defense has been much better than anticipated. They've done a much better job holding teams from scoring high points. I thought they would be giving up 30 points a game. They've been much better than what I anticipated.
All right, there were a couple great games, great finishes yesterday in the NFL, and we're going to start off with last night where the Seattle Seahawks, 35-30 over the New England Patriots. This was a game, Sam, that I thought the Seahawks would win easily. Cam Newton looked good. Julian Edelman, who we ripped on last week because it seemed like they were taking playing time away from him for other guys. All of a sudden, Julian Edelman looked like Tom Brady was out there with him, and Cam Newton looked really good last night.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, 30 for 44, 397 yards, a touchdown, an interception. I mean, if you get rid of that interception, maybe they actually go up there and win the game, but they played really well regardless. You mentioned Julian Edelman, 8 catches for 179 yards, and N'Keal Harry even 72 receiving yards on 8 catches. That's pretty good for him. So the Patriots come out here, and what I'm seeing from this offense, this is definitely a team that could compete with the Buffalo Bills for the division title.
Now, I catch a lot of hell for saying Russell Wilson is by far the best quarterback in the NFL, but what we've seen in these first 2 weeks with 9 touchdowns, I don't see how anybody can argue this anymore, Sam. I mean, he was on point last night. The one interception was basically from a dropped ball, and he's never won the MVP, which to me is mind-blowing. My only question here is you have Wilson throw 5 touchdown passes, a 288 yards, a 132 passer rating, and they barely win. I think the issue here, and it is my issue when you would bring up the fact that you thought they were a Super Bowl contender, the defense is very concerning in Seattle.
Yeah, I agree with you there because they, like I said, they give 30 points to Cam Newton and the New England Patriots, and I thought they were going to go out there and win fairly easily. And you can have Russell Wilson go off and have these monster games, but you're relying on a last-second stop by your defense to win a game like this, where Wilson is as close to perfect potentially as you can get. That one interception was on Greg Olsen. It wasn't on Russell Wilson at all. But I mean, if you're relying on basically luck, basically a flip of a coin to win a game like this, it's really telling that your defense needs to get it together because they are giving too many points right now.
Yeah, but I'll tell you the thing that makes Seattle scary is if they do figure it out at any point. DK Metcalf last year, with the reigning AP Defensive Player of the Year on his hip, looked like a dominant wide receiver. I mean, the guy's a physical marvel anyways, but, I mean, the speed, the build of the body, I mean, this guy is quickly becoming one of the best wide receivers in all of pro football.
Well, and it's funny looking back at it now because he fell to the second round of the draft because people were concerned about his route running or his 3-cone speed and all that kind of stuff. And now 4 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown against the reigning defensive player of the year last night. So that's something that people need to take advantage of. And this is a situation where I just think I could see DK Metcalf becoming if he continues developing a top 10 receiver in a year or two, he's certainly on his way there right now.
All right, let's go to Dallas, where the Cowboys were down 29-10 at halftime. And I guess maybe this is Dan Quinn's new 28-3 game. And I think Dan Quinn's gone. I think he might be gone before this season's over. They lose this game 40-39 to the Dallas Cowboys. Greg Zuerlein banged home a 46-yarder to steal the win. But this is a game where all the Falcons have to do is recover an onside kick or maybe play defense at some point, and they win the game. They didn't get it done. I think Dan Quinn's in trouble, and I feel sorry for Matt Ryan because he's going to throw up 30 points almost every week and still lose.
Yeah, Matt Ryan's played really well so far through the first two games of the season. It's not on him at all. The issue has been play calling. The issue has been the defense. I think Dan Quinn should be gone now because you cannot – they were up 20-0 after the first quarter, and they turned around and they lost that game. That's inexcusable. You cannot allow it to happen at the NFL level. And like I said, they've got some really great players on the Falcons team. They just don't have a complete defense. They don't have any really semblance of defense at all. The defensive coordinator, after his comments last week and then after this performance, needs to probably get out as well.
Oh, Raheem Morris should already be fired. I mean, Dan Quinn should have just told him he wasn't allowed to get on the plane. And the big thing here is the Falcons could have been up by even more than 20-0 after a quarter because they had two short field possessions that turned into field goals. You can't win games kicking field goals unless it's right at the end and you're down by 2 or less. But I think settling for 4 field goals overall when they had short fields really came back to bite them in the butt. And I think there's big problems in Atlanta. And let's face it, there's big problems in Dallas. I mean, Dak Prescott, 34 of 47, 450 yards and a TD, played great. He added 3 rushing scores. But the offensive line is just bad. They're missing their 2 starting tackles. You got some wide receivers. You got a great running back. But it comes back to this. Even with all that offensive firepower, hard to make a Super Bowl run when your defense is as bad as Dallas has been.
Well, it's not even that. I would just look at the play calling. Didn't they run 2 fake punts and they missed both of them? I mean,
it's Mike McCarthy, dude. We saw it last week. It's why they lose to the Rams. I mean, you have a chance to tie the game with 11 minutes left, 4th and 3 inside the 10, and you go for it. I mean, Mike McCarthy's Mike McCarthy, and the problem is he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. He does have Dak Prescott, so he'll win some games. But I'm not a big Mike McCarthy fan. I think this was a bad hire. And I think when you look at this, the only thing that saves Dallas's butt right now is the fact that they're in a division that's an absolute mess.
Yeah, really. I mean, they are in a division with the Eagles, who are just losing right now. Carson Wentz has looked terrible to their first 2 games. The offensive line has struggled. Washington's 1-1. We don't really expect them to be around later in the year. I think they would end up losing the next couple of games in a row. And now the Giants, without Saquon Barkley, they're basically dead in the water, it feels like, although I guess anything's possible in that division at this point.
Yeah, because it's not going to take probably more than 8 or 9 wins to win the division. I would actually give Washington a shot right now just because of the defensive line. Not much of a shot, though. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs traveled to Los Angeles and squeaked by the Chargers 23-20 on a 58-yard game-winning field goal. Now, hard to keep Patrick Mahomes down for 60 minutes, but the Chargers held Mahomes to one of his worst halves of football, holding the MVP quarterback to 60 passing yards, 3.2 yards per attempt, with a 42.1 completion percentage. Mahomes gets off the mat, though, and makes plays at the end of the game and wins the game, similar to what we saw him do in the Super Bowl, Sam. And I think that's why people think that Patrick Mahomes is special, because even if he's bad at the start, you better put that team away by the time you get to the end of the game, or he'll figure out a way to win the game.
Yeah, he came alive there in that final quarter and overtime. I give a lot of props to the kicker, Harrison Butker, because I think he had hit the game-winning field goal at the end there 3 times. There's a penalty. He hit it once. There was a penalty. So he got called back, and they got iced the kicker, then he hit it again, and then he had to actually make the field goal. So he made it 3 times in a row. He deserves a lot of props for that consistency. But again, Patrick Mahomes, a very bad first quarter, and really bounces back, leads the team. They had no running game whatsoever. He's basically doing everything for them.
All right, we have a question from Monarchs9. He says, who are you more impressed with, Burrow or Herbert? Sam?
I mean, they both are playing with terrible offensive lines to some degree. I think Burrow's probably played a better defense in some aspects this past week. I've liked Burrow a lot. I've raved about Burrow at this point. I think Justin Herbert played extremely well. I need another week to tell with him, but I would lean towards I'm more impressed by Burrow so far at this point in the season, just because I think he's actually got a worse supporting cast than Justin Herbert.
Well, I don't know that he's got a worse supporting cast. He's got a worse offensive line, and he's got a worse defense. I mean, the Chargers defense is pretty good, even without Derwin James. They've got a pass rush. Cincinnati doesn't. I think when you look at it, I think skill position player-wise, I think the Bengals are better. Offensive line-wise, I don't know if any team is worse. Defensive-wise, I don't know if any team is worse. And when I look at it, you had a couple of huge mistakes by Justin Herbert, which it was his first game, and Burrow made a couple big mistakes like that in his first game. I thought the Cleveland game in Cleveland for Burrow was a much better game. You didn't have the terrible mistakes, and he threw the ball 61 times. So in the end, this was all on him. I would lean towards Burrow. I'm still not sold on Herbert, but I did think what he did yesterday, while I don't think it was a great performance because he had a couple bad mistakes that may have cost his team the game, he did look better than what I expected him to look.
Well, I'll put this out there. Tyrod Taylor would not perform as well as Justin Herbert did the other day. He would not have gotten to that point in the game.
How about this, though? Tyrod Taylor also probably wouldn't have made those two huge mistakes.
That's also fair. But I don't think they're in the game without Justin Herbert. I don't give Tyrod Taylor a shot.
They might have been in a game just because of how good their defense played. You know, They shut them down for a half. But I don't think they're winning the game with Tyrod Taylor. And as we saw, they didn't win the game with Justin Herbert either. We got the Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl this year. I guarantee it. So that must be Anthony Servino, our old buddy. Pop it in there on that. I don't think there's a chance in hell the Cowboys go. The loss of Leighton Vander Esch is way too much for them to overcome.
Well, that and Sean Lee's missing a bunch of time as well. So the linebacker level are kind of decimated. And we'll go back to that secondary. I mean, look at how many points they've given up in the first 2 weeks. They don't have a secondary. It's just non-existent. Trevon Diggs is the only player back there who can really play for them. So I think there's just no chance. They just don't have a complete team, and that offensive line is not the same as they used to be.
Yeah, and look at it like this. They go to the playoffs. They play Seattle. Seattle's defense isn't that good. It's not as bad as Dallas's. And on top of that, I think Seattle's offense is better because they've got a better quarterback. I mean, they don't have the Ezekiel Elliott. But I would still think that if you go to a team like New Orleans that has a defense also, you really got a problem. But let's move on to another undefeated team that's supposed to be one of the best teams in the NFL, and I don't think there's any doubt that they are. The Baltimore Ravens beat the Houston Texans 33-16. This is a game that was in range for the Texans until early in the fourth quarter. Lamar Jackson completed 75% of his passes. Baltimore rushed for 230 yards. And, I mean, this team's going to be hard to beat with the way they play defense because they force turnovers, they get off the field. You got Justin Tucker, who's one of the best kickers in the NFL, maybe the best kicker in the NFL. And the Ravens are a team that once you fall behind them, the way they run the ball and play defense, it's almost impossible to catch up.
Yeah, you can't because they're just going to run. They're going to run you off the field pretty much. They're going to control the clock, grind your defense down, and keep you out there for a number of plays that you just can't recover from. And it's going to make teams like Houston one-dimensional. They cannot run the ball against Baltimore because you'll get too far behind. You have to throw the ball, and that forces you into making mistakes. That gives opportunities for guys like Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. I don't see a situation in which Baltimore wins fewer than 13 games this year.
Is Houston dead in the water?
I mean, they're certainly looking like it. They've got a tough schedule. Pittsburgh plays them next week. I mean, if they get a win against Pittsburgh, it kind of revives them a little bit. But if they start 0-3, I think they're dead in the water.
I think this right now. I think we got to realize with the pandemic, no preseason, no OTAs, not much training camp. Nobody had a tougher 2 weeks than the Houston Texans. You know, they launched their season after no preseason amid a pandemic season on a Thursday night on the road against the defending Super Bowl champions. Then they come home to an empty home stadium to try to be what very well could be the best team in the NFL. So I really don't think they could be expected to be anything but 0-2. But I think you're right. The Pittsburgh Steelers game is huge for the Houston Texans. And I think Bill O'Brien is going to be hanging out with Dan Quinn next year at this time.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. If they don't make the playoffs this year, I think it's probably curtains for Bill O'Brien.
All right, next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get their first win of the Tom Brady era with a 31-17 win over the Carolina Panthers. And I think reports of Tampa Bay's demise were greatly exaggerated. They didn't look great, but they didn't look bad. And it seems now that Mike Evans and Tom Brady are on the same page, connecting 7 times for 104 yards. And I think the thing to bring up is I don't think the Bucs offense is firing all cylinders yet, but it's definitely gotten away from the starting line with this game.
Well, yeah, and you saw Leonard Fournette kind of take control there. He had over 100 rushing yards. I think he's going to be their back moving forward. Ronald Jones is a decent player, but I think Leonard Fournette's better. I think he asserted himself there. Brandon Evans hooked up. Chris Godwin didn't play, so we didn't get to see him. But when this whole offense is healthy, I think we'll see a team capable of putting up 30 points per game. My one question is, can Birdie eliminate the unnecessary turnovers? He's had 3 so far through 2 games.
All right, Monarch 9 wants to know if we were impressed with the Rams. So we'll go to the Rams-Eagles game next. I am impressed with the Rams. They're a team that I didn't think was going to be a playoff team this year, but I watched them play. To me, Sam, I've never been a Jared Goff fan, but he looks like he's improved this year, and I think the defense is a little better. I don't want to jump on it too quick just because I don't think the Eagles are that good right now with all the injuries they've suffered, but I think with the injuries the 49ers have suffered, it would surprise me right now if the Rams aren't a wild card team, at least.
Well, yeah, because you got the 49ers not going to play Nick Mullins, the quarterback, for this couple of weeks. There's certainly a lot of injuries there. And as for the Rams, yeah, Jared Goff, you know what Jared Goff's doing? He's playing with confidence. I haven't seen Jared Goff play with confidence since like the end of that Super Bowl season where they ended up losing to the Patriots. He hasn't played well, hasn't gone out there and played confidently since then. But now he's got a little bit of a running game. You saw Darrell Henderson go out there and play fairly well. You have Malcolm Brown as well. They're playing all right at running back. And Goff looks like a more confident player than he was last year.
Well, how about this? One thing that can really give a player confidence is to have a tight end that's getting the job done. And Tyler Higbee, caught 3 touchdown passes yesterday. Darrell Henderson saw more touches after Cam Akers suffered a rib injury during the first quarter. And, the second-year running back scored his first touchdown of the season. He had 121 scrimmage yards. And the Rams offense actually looked like the Rams offense from 2 years ago.
I mean, that's part of it, is just incorporating these new players. You got Van Jefferson, a rookie receiver, Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers. You got to incorporate these young players into your offense. It could take a little while, but when it starts hitting all in all cylinders, I think these are the responses we're going to get from the Rams.
Yeah, and I think there has to be major concern with the Eagles because last year, if your wide receivers are beat up, you can find other wide receivers. Other offensive linemen is hard to find. And with the injuries they've got right now, I think they're in deep trouble. And if they don't beat Cincinnati this week and they go to 0-3, and I think the issue here in beating Cincinnati is a lot of times people go, well, they're playing Cincinnati, so they'll win that game. The case is Joe Burrow's good enough. The Eagles are probably going to have to score 30 points to win the game. The Bengals defense is bad enough to give up 30 to anybody, but I think that's what makes week 3 really dangerous for the Eagles. And if they lose that third game, I think they're in for a long season, Sam.
Well, if you start at 0-3, your only hope is that every other team in your division loses because you won't be able to come back to that ordinarily. And again, the offensive line still beat up. They did have Lane Johnson come back the other day, and that really helped them out. But Jason Peterson at left tackle, he's really up there. He's, 36, 37 years old at this point. He's not really playing at a high level. You got Nate Herbig at right guard, and your left guard, who was Isaac, I can't say that last name, Isaac Samalu, he's going to miss time. They've announced today he's going to miss a couple weeks. He's heading to the 3-week IR at least. So your offensive line, you're heading to third stringers at some spots at this point.
Now, let's move over to the 49ers and the woeful New York Jets. San Francisco's injury woes continue to mount. They entered the game without their starting cornerback, wide receiver, tight end, and defensive end. And in the first 30 minutes of action, they lost their starting quarterback, their starting running back, and Raheem Mostert, at the other defensive end, and Nick Bosa. And this is all in 30 minutes. But the one good thing for the 49ers is their backups are better than the Jets. It's kind of like when the varsity team, is up 40-0. You put the JV in, and your JV runs it up to 80-0, and everybody thinks you run up the score. There's a lot of problems in New York. Adam Gase needs to go. He needs to be fired. They need a front office that can get the right players in there around Sam Darnold. And the 49ers are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the 49ers are all trouble, particularly because the division there. And you have to play Russell Wilson twice, Jared Goff twice, and even Kyler Murray twice. So you're really in a situation where these injuries, if they don't get better, they don't get healed up here by week 5 or week 6, you could really start getting yourself in a hole that you might not be able to climb out of. As for the Jets, hitting the nail on the head. They really don't have the pieces around. The offensive line's bad. Jamison Crowder, their best receiver, wasn't playing yesterday. Le'Veon Bell wasn't playing. Even if those guys are healthy, I don't know if they should be the top options in New York moving forward.
All right, anybody that wondered if Ben Roethlisberger can still sling it received that answer in the first half on Sunday when Big Ben delivered a strike to Chase Claypool for an 84-yard touchdown. Having said that, though, the Steelers had a strange game offensively. And I think the lack of weapons is kind of showing up for him. They're kind of uneven. Big Ben's a really good quarterback, but he's getting up there in age. I still have a lot of concerns about the Steelers' offense when it comes to playing the elite teams.
Yeah, no, so you can't do what you did the other day against a really good team. It's just not possible. I think if you do it against Houston, you could be in trouble as well next week. You cannot allow teams to get back.
Yeah, the thing is this. Jeff Driscoll is not,
Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. So, and I mean, Jeff Driscoll was 18 for 34, 256, 2 touchdowns. A defense as good as theirs, that probably shouldn't happen. Melvin Gordon, 19 carries for 70 yards. This is a game I really thought Pittsburgh would win easily. And the fact that they didn't caused me some concern. And the fact that they're 2-0 looks great, but you got wins over the Giants and the Broncos without their starting quarterback. So I think the Steelers defense still keeps them in this. I still think they're a playoff team. But from what I saw, especially skill position-wise, I find it hard to believe they make a deep run in the playoffs.
Well, it's also play call. Randy Fichtner needs to step his game up. I honestly have been off the Randy Fichtner train for a while now, but that third quarter play calling, where Denver scores 11 points unanswered, that's just you can't allow it to happen. You need to be calling better plays. You need to be going for the kill there. You cannot be waiting around and letting Denver get back into the game, which is exactly what they did. So I'm very disappointed in the offensive play calling, especially down the stretch.
All right, Steven Goskowski got the rest of the heat off of him by hitting a 49-yard field goal to give the Titans the lead with 1:36 left to play in a 33-30 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know what is more impressive to me here. Ryan Tannehill, 4 touchdown passes. And I'm telling you, I know you always don't tell me I'm crazy, but I think he's a good quarterback, and I think he's starting to prove that. I think the Titans are going to win this division. But my big question is, the Jacksonville Jaguars don't look like a bad football team right now, Sam.
No, I think the most impressive thing from yesterday's game was that I think Jacksonville is not dead. They're not rolling over here. I think the Jaguars could be a team that they're probably not, like I said, they're not going to win the division. They're not going to make the playoffs. But this was a team I thought could have the number 1 overall pick in the next upcoming draft. I think they're actually going to win 5 or 6 games based on what we saw from them so far. I mean, they won last week already. And now they put up 30 points against a strong Tennessee defense. They almost won the game. And that was with Gardner Minshew throwing 2 interceptions. So I think there's a chance they go out there and win 5 or 6 games. Yeah,
and the thing is this, Minshew, even with the interceptions, he was decisive with the football. He ended the day with over 300 yards passing. And though his 2 interceptions proved costly at the end, the more I see him command the offense and the gutsy throws that he makes to keep Jacksonville in the game, I mean, this is a team that, 5, 6, 7 wins is possible because it's not like the division's real tough. And I'm extremely impressed with them, and I've never been a fan of their head coach. But if this continues for another month, I think he might swing me back over, and I might change my mind on him because, this Jaguars team's playing hard. They remind me right now a little bit of what the Dolphins did last year when we thought that's the team that's going to get Joe Burrow. They're not even trying to win. They got rid of everybody. But this team is playing very hard, and they're going to give people trouble all year the way this looks.
But yeah, I think the key to all this has been Gardner Minshew going out there and making those kind of plays and being willing to step up and be a starting quarterback, but also the running game. James Robinson, 16 carries for 102 yards the other day. And this is a defense that gave the Ravens fits in the playoffs. And the Jaguars go out there and easily have a 100-yard rusher against them. So they're doing something kind of special in Jacksonville, even if it's not going to have a long-term impact on that team.
All right, now the Bears go to 2-0 behind Mitchell Trubisky with a 17-13 win. And I say it like that because I don't think Mitchell Trubisky is very good. But what I do think has been outstanding so far has been the head coach Matt Nagy's play calling. They have protected his quarterback. They've leaned on a running game that I think has been more dynamic than what we thought it would be. David Montgomery led the way with 16 carries for 82 yards, even though he had to leave briefly in the first half with a neck injury. He combined that with Cordero Patterson and Tariq Cohen. The Browns ground game churned up the clock and basically made it a lot easier on Mitchell Trubisky. So when I look at this, I think Matt Nagy is doing a very good job coaching his football team. But I still think this football team is limited, but they have shown that they have the ability to control a game, and Trubisky doesn't have to necessarily win them the game. I still think this is a 5-7 win team. But right now, I'm not as sold that there's no way that they couldn't make the playoffs, Sam.
Yeah, and they defensively shut down the Giants the other day, but we saw the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of do the same thing. the week before. I think it's just a really horrible Giants team, to be honest. It's not necessarily a great Chicago Bears team. And to me, the offense in Chicago is what's going to ultimately kill this team and possibly kill their playoff chances.
Well, I don't think it's the offense. I think it's the fact that Mitchell Trubisky is the quarterback kills him.
But yeah, I mean that specifically is the issue. I mean, 2 interceptions against a bad Giants secondary and only 190 passing yards. You really can't expect to put those numbers up and win against a really good team. I don't see them being able to compete with like Green Bay or something like that.
Now, Daniel Jones in New York, this is still an issue because we're still talking about it. The second-year quarterback fumbles on the opening possession, which leads to a 10-0 hole right off the bat. I mean, he makes some brilliant throws. I like the way he moves up in the pocket to avoid pressure, but it's the brutal mistakes that he has to clean up if he wants to be an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, when I watch Daniel Jones, he looks like an NFL quarterback. Just to the eye, he looks like an NFL quarterback on the field in the pocket. The issue is there are maybe 5 or 6 plays a game where you're thinking, what the hell is he doing? That's really the issue, is that he has those mental lapses. And no touchdowns yesterday, interception, the fumble. It's just mistakes he makes that need to be corrected. Otherwise, there's no future for him in New York.
All right, another team that I think looks better than what I thought they would be, the Green Bay Packers, who beat the Detroit Lions 42-21. They fell in an early hole, but they came back and they dominated this game. And between the two Aarons, Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones, this Green Bay Packer offense, to me, looks better than it was last year even, Sam.
Yeah, no, I agree. Aaron Rodgers is off to a hot start. He played really well in week 1, 240 yards and 2 touchdowns this game. And then Aaron Jones, 18 carries for 168 yards, 2 scores, and 4 catches for 68 yards and another touchdown. It's been a phenomenal offense so far. The one issue for me would be Devante Adams. I think he left with a hamstring injury. If you lose Devante Adams, you're not going to do well against really good teams because he's basically their only primary receiving option. If he's not healthy, they're really going to struggle against the top teams in the NFC.
Yeah, a guy that stood out to me was Rashaan Gary in the second half. Had a sack and a half, 2 quarterback hits, and he's he's getting the job done without Kenny Clark at nose tackle. I think this Green Bay team is better than what I thought they would be, and I think that they really could make a deep run before this is all said and done. Now, I'm still not 100% sold, but when Aaron Rodgers is there and you've got a running game, the defense is at least, I think, above average or slightly above average. I think they're a dangerous team.
When you got to look at the division they're working, they're playing against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings, who played horribly this week. Chicago has Mitch Trubisky, and Detroit, who can't win any close games. So I think it's really a situation where they're playing weak competition compared to what some of the other divisions have.
All right. I think this proves us right. Phillip Rivers, 19-25, 214 yards and a touchdown. The Colts win 28-11. This is what I think we both said 2 weeks ago when I picked them to win the division, and that is the fact that if Phillip Rivers is throwing the ball 20 to 25 times a game, I think the Colts are going to win a lot of games because that means they're running the ball well. I think Marlon Mack getting injured, while it's never a good thing when somebody gets injured, I think Jonathan Taylor's the guy that should have been the starter from the start of the season. He rushed for 101 yards and a touchdown. Indianapolis played ball control offense, and the Colts handled this game rather easily, Sam.
Yeah, and this is like we said. You've been talking about this for weeks now. This is what you're supposed to do. And Jonathan Taylor gets 26 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Wilkins, who's a good backup running back, 9 carries for 40 yards. You need to be running the ball consistently and doing it over 30 times a game because that's your strong suit. You have that offensive line. You need to use it. And defensively, they were good enough to hold the Vikings down and really make Kirk Cousins look like a fool.
All right. I think DeForest Buckner was a bigger addition than Phillip Rivers in the offseason. And I think we saw that yesterday as Buckner collected 1.5 sacks, a tackle for loss, 4 hits on Kirk Cousins, who was under constant duress. I think this. I said it before. I said it at the start of the year. I don't think Mike Zimmer survives this season. I think he's gone by the end of the season. I think that the loss of Stephon Diggs, it just kills this Minnesota offense.
Well, I mean, I'm starting to agree with you there. I thought when you initially said you were crazy, but looking at it now, I mean, 0-2, Kirk Cousins looked helpless the other day. And look at what Stephon Diggs is doing in Buffalo. It certainly seems like he's a much more crucial piece to an offense than I originally gave him credit for.
Yeah, so I think the Vikings are dead. I think Mike Zimmer's job's gone. I think Black Monday this year in the NFL is going to have a lot of people getting fired. Next up, Buffalo Bills 31, Miami Dolphins 28. Josh Allen, who's a guy we both have had questions about in the past, Followed up his first 300-yard game with his first 400-yard game. And the aforementioned Stephon Diggs was a huge catalyst on Allen's big day. The Bills wideout, former Viking wideout, hauled in 8 passes for 153 yards and his first touchdown for the Bills. And I think the addition of Stephon Diggs has made Josh Allen a much better quarterback.
Well, there are deep passes in watching Josh Allen throw now where he's connecting with Stephon Diggs. Where in the past he would have airballed those 5 yards over his receiver's head. So his deep ball accuracy, which was my biggest knock on him going into this season, has been phenomenal. And it's surprising to me how much of an increase it's been. But really, he and Stephon Diggs are connecting. And that deep ball, which was really just pathetic early in the first 2 years of his career, is now suddenly a weapon.
Yeah, and the Dolphins played hard. Ryan Fitzpatrick was much better than last week. He threw for 328 and 2 touchdowns. I'm going to give the Bills defense a pass here because they're playing without Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, 2 of their main linebackers, and they still get the win. And the Dolphins did look better this week. They didn't have all the turnovers they had before. And I think it also makes me think differently about the Dolphins, that now I believe the Patriots really are a serious playoff contender, where before it was like, well, if Cam Newton can do this and Bill Belichick is this, now it just looks like the Patriots are a good team. So it looks like the Bills lost by 10 at New England. They lose by 3 against Buffalo, who I think is one of the best teams in the NFL. So I think the Miami Dolphins, not all is lost, but I'd still play Tua.
Yeah, I would still too. I think you should see him by week 5. I don't know why you're waiting. I don't think it really does anything for Tua unless there's some kind of injury there that we don't know about. But he seems like he's dressed and ready to play. So I would assume that it's got to be Tua time sooner or later.
All right, now another thing that really makes life rough for the San Francisco 49ers are the Arizona Cardinals, who are now 2-0. They beat the Washington football team 30-15. The thing that stood out when I saw this game was Kyler Murphy, to me, looks a lot more confident and a lot more controlled under center. From the onset of this game, he was aggressive. He gashed Washington with quick throws, fast legs. They jumped to a quick 14-0 lead. I think Kyler Murray is going to be a special quarterback in the NFL. And I can also tell you this, though. I was impressed the way Ron Rivera's Washington football team found itself in a 17-0 hole and continued to fight. And I'm still waiting for the day Alex Smith walks on the field.
I mean, really, so you give them a quarterback, give Washington a quarterback who's better than Dwayne Haskins. I really think they could win football games this year. I really think they could have a shot at making the playoffs because they have that dominant defensive front. I think they're finding some of their weapons offensively. So they get some young, skilled players. And in a weak division, I think if you had Alex Smith, a healthy Alex Smith at quarterback, you could win 7 games, which might be all you need to make the playoffs. So Washington, it's really a tough situation because they have a quarterback on their roster where they could get it done for them. But on the Arizona side of things, you're right. Kyler Murray is probably playing like a top 10 quarterback right now. I think we'll see it in my quarterback power rankings tomorrow. He's looking really good. And I've liked the ability. He's combined the running game and the passing game really well. I think you got to eliminate some of the mistakes he's had in the passing game, some of those needless interceptions, but otherwise, he's looked really good.
All right, let's look at this. The injuries from this last weekend. Which one is the most impactful to his team? Which is the biggest loss out of the guys that got hurt?
Well, the biggest loss, even if we're looking at the playoff picture, I think the biggest loss would be Jimmy Garoppolo for the 49ers. Just based on myself from Nick Mullins the other day, he did not look prepared to play. I recognize it was against the New York Jets, but I think you still need to have a confident passer, especially if you get down the stretch and you're playing the Rams or the Seahawks or the Cardinals, even one of those teams from your division. So I think losing Jimmy Garoppolo, which was basically the kind of it's not the backbone of the 49ers offense because that was really the running game, but a solid player who has been able to stabilize that offense. Losing him really throws you out of whack.
I disagree.
Who do you think was the biggest loss?
I think Nick Bosa is. I think he might be the most impactful football player in the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. And the reason I say this is this. You just said Jeff Muller, or Nick Mullins, whatever the hell his name is, Jeff Mullins. He's a all right quarterback. This is a team that likes to run the ball. And if Raheem Mostert is healthy and your defense is still dominant, I think you could still BS your way through and win enough games to maybe make the playoffs. I think when you take Nick Bosa off of this defense, I mean, you've already lost DeForest Buckner. So you're taking maybe two of the best defensive linemen in football off the Super Bowl team from last year. And plus Do we know how bad Garoppolo's injury is yet?
I think it's going to be a couple. It's multiple weeks. It's going to be probably, I think, 2 to 6 weeks, roughly.
All right, so even if it's 6 weeks, I think losing Nick Bosa for the entire season is worse than losing Jimmy Garoppolo for 6 weeks.
No, I can see what you're saying there, because that defensive front was the dominant piece that really lifted them to the NFC Championship last year. And now, like I said, no Buckner, no Bosa. And Solomon Thomas, who's your backup, he tore his ACL as well. So he's gone. Dee Ford wasn't even healthy enough to play on Sunday. So who are you putting at defensive end at this point?
Yeah, so when I look at that, that's the way I go with it. I think with Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, he's got a high ankle sprain. Chances are that's 4 to 6 weeks. Just from my experience with players, I mean, you might be back in 2 to 4 weeks, but right now, if he's back in 2 or 3 weeks, I don't think he's going to be able to move very much in the pocket. And it's an injury that can be no big deal or it can be extremely serious. We've seen in the past. I mean, A.J. Green's high ankle sprain last year probably was 6 to 8 weeks out if it wasn't the fact that he just didn't even want to play until he got a new contract. So I think it's a bad injury, but Mullins wasn't terrible a couple of years ago. And I think with their running game, if Mostert's all right, I think that, they can be all right there. I think another one that's big if he can't play could be on the defensive side for Indianapolis, Malik Hooker.
Yeah, I think some of their safety depth is all right. I know Malik Hooker's been a decent player for them, but at the same point, their safety depth has gotten much better because of the draft this past year. And really, Hooker was a guy, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. They were kind of trending down on him already. I'm going to look for some of their backup safeties to step in, like maybe I think Julian Blackburn, if he gets healthy, he's a rookie I think will step in and make an impact right away. But Malik Hooker, it's an unfortunate end for him because he's going to be a free agent after this year.
Yeah, he won't get near as much money now because of that. Anything else you want to discuss?
Well, there are a couple of players who are going to miss. Like, obviously, Christian McCaffrey said he's going to miss a couple of weeks as well. I mean, this is looking at some of the best players in the NFL who aren't playing. Christian McCaffrey's going to miss.
The Panthers weren't going to win any games anyway, whether he played or not.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bring that up initially, because who cares? The Panthers are going to lose a bunch of games as it is, but he's not playing. Right. Michael Thomas is playing. George Kittle.
That just turns to 35-30 losses into 35-14 losses.
Pretty much. It's going to be Teddy Bridgewater tossing 1 interception and 2.
How about this, though? I mean, the Carolina Panthers, of course, are in Carolina. If they end up with the first pick and they get Trevor Lawrence, that's not a bad position to be in. If you got Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey running the ball, then all of a sudden this team becomes a lot easier to fix.
Well, it becomes a lot easier to fix, and you're certainly going to bring in quite a lot of fans, especially from the college and local areas, if you make that pick.
Yeah. So, anything else, Sam, or are we done for today?
No, I think we're done for the day, Mike.
Are we doing your quarterback rankings tomorrow?
Yep, we can do that. I'll have it up in the morning.
Also, we need a quick pick. Raiders-Saints tonight.
Oh, that's right. Raiders-Saints. Well, Saints. That's not actually too hard. That's pretty simple. I'll take the Saints.
I think Saints also. Do you think they'll cover the 5.5 points, which is very important to a lot of our listeners and some of our hosts?
To some of our listeners and maybe some of our hosts, but yeah, I think they'll cover it.
All right. I do worry a little bit because I think Josh Jacobs gives the Raiders the ability to stay in most any game if they can control the clock with him running the ball. And I do think Derek Carr's good. I just don't know that the Raiders defense can do much about the Saints offense.
Yeah, I don't think they can either. By the way, Mike, I forgot to tell you this. You went 14-0 in your picks yesterday. I
did?
Yeah, you did. You were 14-0.
14-0 is not too bad.
No, it's pretty good. You got.
It looks like you would tweet that out and put it on Facebook and everything. What did you go?
I went 12-2.
That's weak compared to 14-0, Sam.
Yeah, I know. I did went against you on 2 games. I lost both of them. So.
14-0. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, you did really well. You picked all the ones right. You could go 15-1 this week if you win tonight.
Damn Bengals. And see, I told you I didn't think the Bengals would win unless they went 5 wide and threw the ball, and they didn't. And they did a few times, and that's when they scored. But then Opie Taylor is the worst football coach in the history of Western civilization, not named Rick Kotite.
Yeah, just that one game.
But, all right, so from now on, if you all want betting advice, just hit me up at the Grueling. But you can follow Sam Teets on Twitter at SamTeets33, and I do expect to see a post about that 14-0 on Sunday, too. because I would do
All right,
that.
I will. I'll send it out.
You can follow me at Grueling Truth. You can hear all of our shows podcast form on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcast, you'll find the Grueling Truth. And you can find us live every day at 1 o'clock on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitch, of course, Twitch Live. I don't know that there's not anything but Twitch Live, and Periscope, where we'll be live. And tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we'll do the quarterback power rankings. We'll look back at tonight's Raiders-Saints game. And then at 2 o'clock tomorrow, probably the most hyped show since Roots will be on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. And that will be the Sam and Sam Show with Sam Teets and Sam McGinnis. We have all your Sam needs all on one show at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
I'd like to point out this was McGinnis's idea, and he picked the name.
This is the thing. No matter whose idea it was, you went along with it.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe I'll just pop in and harass you both, since I like to make fun of both of you.
Yeah, that would actually probably work out in your favor. Both there for you. Easy targets.
All righty. We are going to go ahead. We're going to wrap it up. We'll be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon with the NFL show. So for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening and watching to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.